It happened. A city did outlaw pinball. Not just one city, but many. The main reason was simple. They saw it as gambling. This story starts long ago. It's a real look at how something innocent can get caught up in big worries. And it shows how people can change their minds. Here's how it all went down. Pinball started out very simply. It wasn't always a complicated game with flashing lights. Imagine a board with nails. You launched a ball. It bounced off the nails. That was pretty much it. People played these games in parlors. They were just for fun. You put in a coin, you pushed a plunger, the ball went flying. These machines were new. They were exciting. They offered a quick bit of fun for a small price. People liked them. They were an escape. This was in the early 1930s. America was in the Great Depression. Money was tight. Any cheap entertainment was welcome. Pinball machines popped up everywhere. They were in arcades, they were in drugstores, they were even in candy shops. Then came a change. Machine makers got smart, they added features, flippers came later, but first they added ways to win. You didn't just play for a score. You could win something. Sometimes it was a free game. So you played well. The machine gave you another go. That seemed fair enough. It was like getting a high score. But then, some operators pushed it further. They weren't just giving free games. If you won a certain number of free games, they might pay you cash instead, or merchandise. Maybe a cigar, maybe a small prize. This was where the line blurred. It stopped being just amusement. It started to look like gambling. A player would put in a nickel. They played the game. If they were good or lucky, they might get a payout. It wasn't always a lot, but it was a payout. This felt different. You weren't just spending money for fun, you were spending money with the hope of winning more. That's the definition of gambling to many people. The machines themselves became more complex. They had more lights, more bells. They were designed to draw you in, they were designed to make you want to play again. And again, the allure of winning something was strong. People started to spend more time and more money. Cities started to notice. They saw these machines. They saw people gathered around them. They saw money changing hands, not just the coin to play, but money from the operator to the player. It looked like a game of chance. Even if skill was involved, luck played a big part. And if you could win money, it raised questions. Concerns started to grow. It wasn't just about fun anymore. It was about risk. It was about losing money. It was about the idea of people getting hooked. The innocent machine was starting to look less innocent. It was starting to look like a problem. It was turning into something lawmakers would soon target. The machines were mechanical. They were loud. They were everywhere, and they were making money for the operators, for the manufacturers. But some people worried about the players. They worried about what this new form of entertainment was doing to society. The seeds of a ban were planted. The change from amusement to menace happened fast. It was like a snowball rolling downhill. Pinball got a bad name. It became linked with trouble. People started calling it a device of chance. They said it encouraged idleness. They said it took money from working people and from children. This was during the 1930s and 1940s. These were serious times. The country had just been through the Great Depression. People valued hard work. They valued thrift. They wanted social order. Anything that seemed to undermine these values was seen as a threat. Pinball fell right into that category. Religious groups spoke out. Community leaders raised alarms. They saw pinball as a drain on resources. They saw it as a distraction. They worried about kids spending their lunch money on games. They worried about adults spending their paychecks. It wasn't just about the game itself. It was about what it represented. Newspapers loved these stories. They wrote sensational headlines. Pinball menace sweeps city. Gambling devices corrupt youth. They painted a picture of pinball parlors as dens of iniquity. They linked them to other vices: alcohol, smoking, petty crime. The truth was, pinball machines were often in places that already had a reputation. In pool halls, bars. But the machines themselves started to get blamed for the bad behavior found in those places. Mayors and police chiefs joined the chorus. They saw it as their duty to clean up their cities. They wanted to protect their citizens. They wanted to maintain law and order. Pinball became an easy target. It was visible, it was new, and it had that shady link to gambling. The argument went like this: pinball machines were games of chance. They were not games of skill. You put in your coin, you pushed the plunger. The outcome was mostly luck. You couldn't control the ball that much, and because you could win money, that made it gambling. And gambling was illegal in most places, or at least tightly controlled. This wasn't just about a few machines. It was about a broader moral panic. People were worried about the direction society was heading. They saw signs of moral decay. Pinball became a symbol of that decay. It was something they could point to. something they could try to eliminate. The idea of a gateway vice was strong. If you started with pinball, where would you end up? Serious gambling, crime. These fears were real for many people. They genuinely believed that allowing pinball to flourish would lead to worse things. They weren't just being killjoys, they were acting on what they felt were legitimate social concerns. The calls for bans grew louder. Petitions were signed, speeches were given. Lawmakers felt pressure to act. They had to show they were doing something, that they were protecting their communities. And pinball, this seemingly simple game, became caught in the crosshairs of this intense moral debate. The stage was set for a big crackdown, and it would start in a very big city. New York City was often a trendsetter. What happened there often spread elsewhere, and in the mid-1940s, New York City took a very strong stance against pinball. The man leading the charge was Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia. He was a tough mayor. He was known for fighting crime. He was known for cleaning up the city, and he hated gambling. LaGuardia saw pinball machines as pure gambling. He didn't care for arguments about skill. To him, they were nothing more than coin-operated slot machines. They were draining money from people. They were a blight on the city. He saw them as part of a larger problem of corruption and vice. He declared war on them. His campaign was swift and dramatic. Police raids became common. Officers would storm into arcades and stores. They would seize pinball machines. They would haul them away. Thousands of machines were confiscated. It was a huge operation. The city was serious about this, and LaGuardia made it very public. He wanted to send a clear message. He famously staged an event where he took sledgehammers to confiscated pinball machines. He smashed them into pieces. He did this in front of cameras. He did it for the newspapers. It was a spectacle. It was symbolic destruction. It showed the city's resolve. It showed his personal hatred for these games. The official justification was always the same. Pinball was a game of chance. It violated gambling laws. Even if a machine didn't offer direct cash payouts, the potential for free games, which could then be exchanged for cash by unscrupulous operators, was enough. The city's legal department backed the mayor. They argued in court that pinball was indeed a gambling device. This wasn't just a minor skirmish, it was a full-blown battle. Pinball operators and manufacturers fought back. They argued their games were skill-based, they argued they were legitimate entertainment. But LaGuardia's campaign was powerful. The public sentiment was often against the machines. The image of kids losing their money was a strong one. Other cities watched New York, and many followed suit. Philadelphia, Los Angeles, Chicago, bans on pinball machines spread across the United States. It became illegal to own, operate, or even play pinball in many places. The machines went underground, or they were simply destroyed. The economic impact was huge. Pinball manufacturers saw their businesses crumble. Operators lost their livelihoods. The industry, which had been booming, was suddenly in crisis. They had to adapt, or they had to shut down. This era of bans lasted for decades in some places. For nearly 40 years, pinball was outlawed in New York City. It was seen as too dangerous, too corrupting. The city's stance was unyielding for a very long time. It was a testament to the power of a moral crusade, and to the strength of a mayor determined to enforce his vision of a clean city. The crackdown was complete, but the story didn't end there. Pinball wasn't dead. It was just waiting for its chance to come back. The pinball industry didn't just disappear. They fought back. It was a long, slow fight, but they believed in their product. They believed pinball was a game of skill, and they wanted to prove it. Their main argument was simple. Playing pinball well took practice, it took hand-eye coordination, it took timing. A skilled player could consistently score higher. They could keep the ball in play longer. They could aim for specific targets. This wasn't just luck, it was about talent. They compared pinball to other accepted games. Bowling was a game of skill. Pool was a game of skill. You could get better at those. Why was pinball different? They argued it shouldn't be lumped in with slot machines. A slot machine is pure chance. You pull a lever, you hope for the best. With pinball, you controlled the flippers. You influenced the game. The industry also tried to clean up its act. They removed payout features from new machines. They made it clear that their games were for amusement only. No cash prizes, no converting free games into money. They wanted to distance themselves from the shady operators who had abused the system. They wanted to be seen as legitimate entertainment providers. Manufacturers started designing machines specifically to emphasize skill. They added more complex rules, more targets, more ways for players to demonstrate their mastery. The games became more intricate. They demanded more from the player than just a lucky plunge. But the bans were deeply entrenched. Mayors and police chiefs held firm. The legal system was slow to change its mind. It was hard to overturn decades of established belief. Many officials still saw pinball through the lens of LaGuardia's fights. They saw it as inherently corrupting. This led to an underground pinball scene people still wanted to play. In cities where it was banned, machines were sometimes hidden in back rooms or in private clubs. People would seek them out. The desire for this form of entertainment was strong. It showed that, despite the laws, pinball had a loyal following. Some cities were less strict, or their bans were not enforced as heavily. This created a patchwork of legality across the country. In one town, it might be fine. In the next, it could get you arrested. This made it difficult for the industry to recover fully. Over the years, the social landscape changed. The moral panic of the 1930s and 40s faded. New forms of entertainment emerged. People became less fixated on pinball as the ultimate evil. The arguments of the industry slowly gained more traction. Younger generations didn't have the same ingrained prejudice against the game. The fight was not about a quick victory, it was a war of attrition. It required persistent lobbying. It required legal challenges, it required changing public perception one person at a time. The industry had to convince people that pinball wasn't a game for shady characters in dark alleys. It was a game for everyone, it was fun, and it took skill, and eventually they would get their chance to prove it in a very public way. The bans on pinball didn't last forever. They slowly began to crumble. One of the most famous turning points happened in New York City. It was in 1976. A key part of overturning the ban involved a man named Roger Sharp. He was a pinball enthusiast and journalist. He was asked to testify in a New York City Council hearing. The goal was to prove pinball was a game of skill, not chance. Sharp stood before the council members. He pointed to a pinball machine. He said he could call out a shot. He said he could hit a specific target. He explained that a skilled player could aim the ball. He could control its movement. He was proving that it wasn't just about luck. Then he made his famous prediction. He announced exactly where he would hit the ball. He launched it, and he hit the target he called out. The council members were stunned. It was a powerful demonstration. It showed them beyond doubt that skill was a major factor in playing pinball. That moment was crucial. Soon after, New York City lifted its nearly 40-year ban on pinball. It was a huge victory for the industry and for pinball fans. Other cities followed New York's lead. The bans that had been in place for decades across the country started to fall away. The pinball was finally legal again, for real. This marked a resurgence for the game. The late 1970s and 1980s became a golden age for electronic pinball. New machines were incredibly sophisticated. They had complex scoring systems, digital displays, sound effects, advanced electronics. They were more engaging than ever. They were pure amusement. They weren't seen as gambling anymore. The public perception had changed completely. Pinball was now understood as a legitimate form of entertainment. It was a game you could master, a game that offered challenges and rewards based on your ability. It was no longer linked to vice. It became part of mainstream arcade culture, but the legacy of the ban still exists. It shaped the game's development. For decades, designers had to be careful. They had to make sure their games didn't look too much like gambling. This pushed them to create more elaborate, skill-focused designs. It forced innovation. Today, pinball machines are collectibles. They are celebrated pieces of history. Tournaments are held. People restore old machines. New machines are still made, blending classic play with modern technology. It's a niche, but passionate community. Looking back, the reasons for the original ban seem overblown now. Was pinball truly a dangerous form of gambling, or was it just caught up in a broader social anxiety? Likely a bit of both. The earliest machines with easy cash payouts did indeed cross a line. But the blanket ban on all pinball, regardless of payout, was extreme. It reflected a fear of new things, a desire for moral order, and a misunderstanding of the game itself. The story of pinball's outlawing is more than just about a game. It's a story about how society views leisure, how it struggles with new forms of entertainment, how moral crusades can sweep up even the simplest joys, and how, eventually, common sense and a good demonstration can win out. Pinball went from being a feared symbol of vice to a beloved part of pop culture. It was quite a journey for a little silver ball.